Challenge of the Super Friends. Every time I watch this episode, it really feels like that it aged too differently to the point that people were overlooking it, to the point that every time I look at Blue in this episode, he's basically in Mac's position, but at the same time, he was in the same position in the Season 2 episode where he wanted to be famous, but realized that it was too much pressured and exhausting to the point that he really wants to be with Mac. And while this episode is supposed to be a lot more different than that episode, it didn't change the fact that Mac is so into Imaginary Man to the point that Blue getting left out isn't really punishment from the stuff that he did in the past. This is an example on the fact that when a character gets punishment, it's not done for the right reasons. The episode begins with the Foster's characters trying to stop the giant imaginary friend from wreaking havoc in the city, and this leads to Imaginary Man to the rescue by stopping the monster and putting him in a cage next to Foster's. To give credit where credit is due, the design of Imaginary Man is really great, especially the red, white, and blue where he goes super speed. It's still American colors, but still, I actually kind of like this design, even to this day. However, this leads to Mac being so invested with Imaginary Man that when he offered him to be his sidekick, he takes the opportunity, which made Blue more paranoid to the point that he is no longer with Mac. And considering that through the majority of the episode that Mac never acknowledges Blue whatsoever to the point that he instantly forgets about him and doesn't even understand until why he came in at bad timing to have Nemesis escape. It's too difficult to see him as the bad guy in all this by joining Nemesis's team in order to face off Imaginary Man and Mac. Now, watching this episode back then when I was really little, this episode isn't meant to be taken seriously from my point of view back then, since that it's supposed to be fun of having two characters being on opposite teams that will collide. However, it doesn't really change the fact that when you get older and older, the episode's charm just fades away. At times, I'm supposed to have this impression back then that this is supposed to be fun and not meant to be taken seriously, but with Mac just hanging out with Imaginary Man and just completely forgetting about Blue in general, and the fact that he decorates the entire treehouse that he and Blue made together that is meant to be their treehouse. Honestly, it's ridiculous that selfishness is only catered to some characters that get too much attention when it comes to that type of character development. And then when it doesn't apply that to characters like Mac, honestly, I can't be able to side with Mac being with Imaginary Man. And that is saying something when I'm the type of person who can't be able to stand that criticism towards the Loud House characters because it's getting done to death. And this is honestly one of the rare occasions where that criticism is highly implied. To put this in a relatable sense, kids do look up to superheroes too much. If they exist in the real world, they will be so obsessed to the point that they want to be their sidekick, which is their dream, and I can understand where Mac is coming from. However, if this still applies to the real world that superheroes does exist, that will also apply to that their friendships could be broken because of it. And the fact that Blue is really paranoid on what could happen to Mac if he stays away from him for too long, it will lead to him getting adopted. And honestly, the fact that it has never been mentioned throughout this entire episode when it comes to Mac's goal of going back to Foster's every day. Blue will have been adopted if he never became Lord unicorn. So, if he never appealed to the battle between the Imaginary Man and Mac facing off Nemesis, then I'm pretty sure that he would have been adopted. So, putting that in mind, Mac was being selfish and not remembering his biggest goal when it comes to coming back to Fosters. And even though that what Blue did in episodes before, he was selfish and it was difficult to feel sympathy towards him, but at the same time, seeing Mac as the selfish one is way more difficult for me to feel sympathy towards him, despite the fact of what Blue put him through. Because if there were more episodes like this, then it would probably be a showcase that no one is in the right. Everyone would probably be in the wrong, and it would probably have a difficult time for me to find anyone I should side with. Like, in the Loud House, it's really obvious that no one is in the right, but at the same time, with how ridiculous it got, it was so pressured to the mind that it just makes it difficult to find any good or bad that were considered anything that would have been avoided. But with this show only focusing on the bond between Mac and Blue, honestly, I can't even imagine how they would have developed it much more better if it didn't get in the way from Cartoon Network executives. Because if you ask me, if Mac had every right to be away from Blue, this would have made more sense. But at the same time, the fact that he has no knowledge of Blue and why he became Lord Unicorn, in all honesty, being disowned is way more difficult to take and difficult to forgive the other person as you get older and older and picking up the pieces instead of just focusing on Blue's character. As for Nemesis, the antagonist in this episode, she's just there. And with the truth revealing that she is the sister of Imaginary Man, or in the point of view of the kids who made Imaginary Man and Nemesis, Imaginary Man's nemesister, it just makes me question, why did anyone find the people who made Imaginary Man and Nemesis and not getting the information that they're siblings? Because it is possible to make imaginary superheroes, but at the end of the day, thinking of how these two kids somewhat cause havoc when it comes to the superheroes going to places, facing off each other, where have they been when Blue is trying to prevent Mac from being with Imaginary Man and figuring out the situation involving Blue and Mac? Granted, the kids who made Imaginary Man and Nemesis don't need the information, but at the same time, with how unserious this is when it comes to Frankie just taking in on Blue's taunt to evil, mainly giving him his space despite wearing a unicorn outfit, I honestly have nothing to say about it, because it just feels a lot more awkward and difficult when this type of plot involving Blue being in the position that Mac is usually in with the troubles that Blue caused. I still got nothing. That's how little I think of this episode upon getting older and older. This episode has its moments, mainly the superhero action moments, which also includes Blue and Mac working together as a team, but it doesn't make up the entire episode. If people ignore the superhero aspects in this episode, the other thing that they can remember the most that is humorous is Blue attempting to be a superhero by using a kitchen table cloth or something that covers up the entire table, and he uses it as a cape that still has the dishes on it, and Eduardo, who uses it as a bib or something while he's being dragged while eating cereal. And Eduardo eats cereal while watching what is going on throughout the episode. Honestly, I would say that this is supposed to be a positive even years after watching this episode, but at the same time, you will probably have to ignore character development in order to make this episode good in your point of view. With only one more episode left tomorrow, it's going to be another Blue episode, and it's from Season 5. I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10.